All right, guys. Well, we are what I'm considering the downhill slide of season 4, right? To me, season 4 kind of peaked with Killer KITT, and here on out, it kind of heads back down to a disastrous finish with Voodoo Night, which we will cover here in a few weeks. But for now, we're at Out of the Woods. Now, Out of the Woods is not a terrible episode. There are a few highlights to include, the appearance of the Dukes of Hazzard farm, which we'll cover here in a little bit. But, NBC at the time gave notes whenever they were filming this episode. And it said, while the script has plenty of action, notes were given to make Michael more active and less reactive. Revised pages have improved Michael's motivation, but the script still relies on action to carry Act 4. The raw footage, or dailies, has been adequate, they said. So, again, not the worst of season 4, not the best of season 4, but still a pretty decent episode that I'm kind of excited to dig in together with you. So, with that said, let's start tearing apart Out of the Woods. Production 60211, Out of the Woods. This episode was written by Gregory S. Dinallo and directed by Harvey Laidman. It originally aired on NBC January 17th, 1986, Friday, 8 p.m. It was filmed from July 17th through the 25th of 1985, which makes it the 65th episode to air, but the 76th to be produced. In fact, Out of the Woods was filmed immediately after Night of the Juggernaut. Why was it held back so long? I don't know, to be honest with you. Synopsis reads as follows. Michael investigates a couple's claim that a local logging company is cutting their timber illegally. So we talked to director Harvey Laidman a number of years ago about this episode, and he said, this is what I call a Knight Rider simulation show. Like Circus Nights from the previous year, we couldn't duplicate the atmosphere, so in this case, we were logging in Beverly Hills with surplus telephone poles. Devin pulls in his limo to Jonathan Dutton's house. You can kind of see it in the background here. In reality, this house is the same one we saw in Season 3 in Nightlines for Kavanaugh's house. And if you're interested in it, it's on Potrero Road, Westlake Village. The house is now covered by trees. It's up there somewhere, but you can see the entrance is pretty much exactly the same as it was back in the 80s. Yeah, there's a better look at the house right there. All those trees have now grown up. All right, so we have Devin and Bonnie walking into the house. And, if you watch the Season 4 opening credits, you see there's a lot of scenes from this episode in the Season 4 credits. And that's, again, because it was filmed right after Night of the Juggernaut. So they had the footage to be able to splice into the Season 4 intro because this was filmed so early, even though it was held back so late. Interesting piece of trivia, Patricia McPherson actually wears this exact same outfit to the 1985 NBC All-Star Hour, which was aired just, 2 months after this episode was filmed. So here, take a peek at that.
Need I say more? Ladies and gentlemen, from Knight Rider, Patricia McPherson, and from Hill Street Blues, Ed Marinaro.
It's a great pleasure for Ed and me to introduce our next new show. It's a sitcom, a daring sitcom dealing with the relationships, the ups and downs of 4 women. 4 mature women. What a breakthrough on TV.
It's not only a breakthrough, it's funny and human and real at the same time.
A larger part of its success is due to the 4 women on the show. Individually, they're tremendously gifted. Together, they're dynamite.
Patricia, I think you're kind of dynamite.
The witty B. Arthur.
I also think you're very witty.
The frisky Betty White.
I bet you can be frisky, too.
The sensuous Rue McClanahan.
I know you're sensuous.
The adorable Estelle Getty. Ed?
Enough about you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Golden Girls.
All right, so now we're supposedly in the Dutton's house. In reality, this is the what I call the staircase set, which was on stage 1 at Universal. This is the same general purpose set built for Knight Rider's 3rd season. We saw it in Halloween Night, Night in Disgrace. We'll see it again in Night Flight to Freedom and Voodoo Night. And it might be more familiar to you if we look at it from here. You know, this is why I call it the staircase set, right? Not actually in a house. One other thing I wanted to point out, during this scene, we see Eric Whitby come in and chainsaw a baby grand piano. So Harvey Laidman, when we talked to him, was telling us about that. So he said, when I was an assistant director around 1970, I worked on a film called Sometimes a Great Notion, which was from the novel by Ken Kesey about a logging family. In the film, Paul Newman walks into a finance company and saws a desk in half with a chainsaw. For Out of the Woods, the prop guys purchased this cute black lacquer baby grand piano and took the insides out. After the episode was done, I asked if I could have the piano. I intended to glue it back together and put it in my living room. At first the studio said okay, but then the lawyers got into the act and said absolutely not, even if I paid what the studio paid. Their reasoning was that I somehow had manipulated the show into acquiring the piano and that I intended to have it all along. Years later, I was scouting locations on the Universal backlot and we passed the dump where I caught a glimpse of that black lacquer baby piano half buried in garbage. That's a shame. All right, so here we see Eric Whitby at his house, and he's described in the script as 22, 6'3", 225 pounds of muscle, Mackinaw jeans, and unbridled anger. And that about fits, doesn't it? So, all right, let's talk about the location. Yes, this is the same location where they filmed the Dukes of Hazzard. This is the Duke's house and the barn right over here. We'll also see the Boar's Nest building here in a little bit. According to Harvey Laidman, we went out to Valencia to a farm that belonged to Lou Ayres. We used to shoot the Dukes of Hazzard there. There's a roadhouse set and a farmhouse set that we burned. We used the same farmhouse on the Dukes. And then he goes on to say, we had a great special effects people who totally controlled the fire using propane burners and long troughs. The troughs were placed beneath the view of the camera lens and were set for each camera angle and then rapidly extinguished. The fire department was present, and usually fire scenes are very difficult to control. Being a practical house, not a set, all fire and camera angles were enclosed inside. We used a lot of fire between the camera and the actors, which made it look perilous. Everything went very quickly, which was quite unusual for scenes like this. It's a credit to a crew that worked together for years and was very professional. So we'll get to the actual scenes where it shows it burning and try and deduce if they actually burned the place down or not. All right, so here's a close-up look at Eric Whitby. Notice his hat. That is the exact same hat we saw Joe Flynn wearing in season 3's 10 Wheel Trouble, right? He wears that exact same Loot Corp hat. And speaking of hats, Michael's wearing this interesting looking cowboy hat. And this is the scene where Eric shoots the hat and it, flies off of Michael's head. But interestingly enough, if you freeze frame it here, you can see the wire right here that he uses to pull it off, just like that. How about that? Of course, they're not actually going to shoot at Hasselhoff, right? But yeah, little fishing line there, and of course they didn't digitally erase it or anything like that, but I guess you're not supposed to pause it here and see that. All right, so here we have the trailer convertible, which you never really see any more of it than what we see here. But a couple things I wanted to point out. First of all, this is a fake dash. If you were able to see on the other side of the dash, you'd see stickers. We can see there's no countdown here, which is just par for the course for this car. And no, it's not a white wire alert. I know you'd really want it to be. We haven't had a white wire alert in so long. But what we're actually looking at here is the windshield structure, I guess you could say, of the actual Trans Am this was built from. We know that the trailer convertible was built from a white hardtop Firebird. that was wrecked. So it was possibly one of the train wreck cars, probably one of the train wreck cars, but we know it was wrecked. So then they cut the front of it off and did a whole bunch of work, but we do know it was white. So what you're seeing here is the white paint from the factory of this Firebird, and the headliner's kind of sagging, but there is not a white wire there. Sorry. All right, so again, since this was a trailer convertible, this is the one that actually had the working roof, which we don't see too often. Actually, I'm not sure we ever really see it from this angle, and it's pretty neat whenever you really take a look at it. So what do we see here? Well, they put some headliner material up here. This is supposedly the overhead console, but take a look at this. There's actually a latch right here, right? They took a blank overhead console and they cut a notch in it, and they put this handle in here so when the roof closes they can actually latch it on to the frame, much like an actual hardtop convertible. Once it's up, they need a way to latch it into the roof, and that's exactly what this piece is right here. And they have a bunch of screws kind of just haphazardly holding the overhead console in place, but that's what you're looking at there. Still really neat how they built this. It was a man named Dennis Braid who came up with the mechanism and the design of this, and to be able to transform a real Trans Am into this half car with a working roof. I mean, it's pretty impressive if you think about it. Alrighty, so now we're approaching the Dutton the Dutton Industries mill, right? A couple things to note. First of all, here's another one of the Universal Studios GMC Astros, right? We've talked about these a decent bit lately, but this is part of their fleet. And when we pull in the Dutton Industries Humboldt Mill, this is previously was known as the Boar's Nest for the Dukes of Hazzard. So kind of neat, another neat crossover from, we in season 1 we had the general, or a fake General Lee, being destroyed and Give Me Liberty or Give You Death. Here we have the Duke's farmhouse getting set on fire. It's no wonder there's a rivalry between the Dukes and Knight Rider, right? All right, and we've got MC Gainey here returning to the show. He was last seen way back in season 1 in a plush ride as Jason Keller. Here he plays Jerry Nash. And another interesting Dukes connection, in 2005, so about roughly 20 years after this episode was filmed, he played Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane in one of the Dukes reboot movies. So there you go, there's your other connection. Also notice how much it's raining in this scene, which is kind of rare for Knight Rider. If you look in the background, you can see all the raindrops coming down. You can see his jacket's a little bit wet here. His jacket's super wet, right? So one of the rare times we see rain in Knight Rider. All right, so Michael and Kit leave. We've got, Nash called one of the rigs to run him off the road. We've got this great interior shot of Kit. This is one of the stunt cars. And what's interesting to note, if I zoom in right here, this is where the voice box should be. Notice how there's an indent here. So this is a dash that's right out of the mold, and this is what it looked like. There was an indent here. And notice this red circle. This is a light. This is the brake line lock light. So whenever Jack Gill or whoever the stuntman was needed to activate the line lock so they could spin the car around, do burnouts, whatever, that light would activate. It would be right in their face. They would know the line lock was activated. That's what you're looking at there. Also note, you can faintly see the imprint of the season 2 dash in here. This is where the digits were for the tack. This is the arc right there for the tack. Just some neat little Easter eggs there. All right, and here's yet another GMC Astro, part of the Universal Studios fleet. This is one of the red ones, multicolored red ones right there. And we've got Samantha Dutton, played by Nancy Everhard, here pulling up to the mill, driving a Mercedes that looks suspiciously like Devon's Mercedes, but I don't think it is. Doesn't this one look... Devon's are more of a bright red. This is like a rust red, so it's probably not one of his cars, but sure is pretty close. And here's a neat little error, I guess. So you see this insert shot of Samantha handing Michael one of the tags from the logs. And we know you can tell this is an insert shot. This is not Hasselhoff. This is not Nancy Everhard. But look at the number, 11002277. All right, and then we go ahead into the insert shot of Michael holding it, and look, it's 112222003. So it's a totally different ticket. And see how much it's bent at the top here? When you see Kit's analyzing, it's the same number, but it's a nice clean ticket. So multiple tickets all around. None of them match each other. All right, so you come over to this angle back at the Dutton house, and this is a much, much better view of the Dukes farm. This is, the generally would always be parked right where this Dodge is. Here's the door where the Dukes would come out of a lot. So it's neat that not only do they film here, but they filmed from a lot of the same angles that they did in the Dukes of Hazzard. So you can clearly tell it's the same place. All right, so KITT has an issue in this episode, right? Every time he runs over a rock, he starts speaking with a New York accent, Bronx accent. This is the one and only time we see that Michael is able to control whether KITT talks or not by this speech synthesis module. We never see it, haven't seen it before, never see it again, but apparently that button controls whether KITT can talk or not. So if KITT's getting annoying, Michael can hit that button and shut him up. All right, 2 other additional features, new for this episode, sort of. Hydraulic lift, rapid cycle. So hydraulic lift is kind of like the not predecessor, but it's the what's the word I'm thinking of? Comes after high traction drop downs, right? High traction drop downs and hydraulic lift, pretty much the same thing, right? They just kind of renamed it. But like I said, Out of the Woods was actually filmed right after Night of the Juggernaut. But if you remember back in Burial Ground, there's a scene with Michael and KITT in the semi, and Mike, Bonnie's briefing Michael. Michael sitting in the car, he presses some buttons, and KITT kind of lowers down, which is the hydraulic lift. You don't see the button, but it's actually the hydraulic lift. But this is the first time we see what it's actually called in the episode. So I wanted to step back for a moment before we continue on to this scene. We were talking about how KITT, when he gets hit by something, he reverts to this New York accent. Well, in this scene, we see KITT running over some rocks, right? And then that spurs his accent. So this is one of the 2 cars we own. This is the car you've seen on Jay Leno's Garage and the one we just had at RetroCon. It's wearing a different bumper here because early in the 4th season, it had this prototype bumper that George Barris designed, which was his newer, more angular bumper that you see here, but it also had turn signal cutouts. This bumper would last just a couple more episodes production-wise on this car before they take it off and swap it in with the standard season 4 smooth rubber bumper. But when we were taking this car apart and doing the preservation work on it, under the control arm right here was a bunch of gray painted styrofoam. It was all shoved up in the control arm. And once we started putting the pieces together, we realized it is a piece of these rocks right here, which is just totally ridiculous. That pieces of these rocks, because these aren't real rocks, right? They don't have the car running over real rocks. And actually, if you watch this, when KITT runs them over, they kind of shatter just like their foam, like hard foam. If you think about the block foam you can get to put fake flowers in, that's kind of what this foam is. And there's evidence that it was green, but then they painted it gray to make it look like rocks. So we have some of these screen-used fake rocks pieces that we'll cut away and show you now.
All right, guys, so as promised, here is the leftover pieces of that rock from Out of the Woods. So let's take a look at it here. Take the cover off. We have it. This is probably the most revered piece of floral foam ever, right? But this is what I was talking about. So you see here, I know it's wiggling here. Let me stop it. So this green here is the original color of the foam. But see this block? See how it's painted gray? You can see some of the green coming through. They painted it this way to make it look like a rock. And all of this was jammed in the control arm of our car at the exact place where where KITT ran over those so-called boulders. So, of course, it's not 100% confirmed that these are rocks from Out of the Woods, but we know every single scene that our car was used in that made it into the episodes, at least. This is the only scene where KITT runs over something that could potentially get wedged in that control arm. So I'm like 99% sure These are screen-used rocks, screen-used fake rocks from Out of the Woods right there. So we mounted them in this little display case. You can just barely see I used some green wire here to kind of tie them together very carefully so they'd stay, in place, but the wire's pretty much hidden when you display it this way, and it's just kind of just a really cool, bizarre screen-used piece right there.
All right, so let's go through this sequence of the Dukes farm. So clearly, it's clearly on fire here, right? I don't see any of the troughs that the director, Harvey Laban, was talking about. Maybe they're behind these bushes here, but let's advance here. So they're showing a house fully engulfed, and it's the same. This is not stock footage. This is actually the house fully engulfed. And we see flames coming in through the windows, flames out back. Boy, it sure looks like they burned this place, didn't they? I mean, maybe they burned it. Maybe they burned it and then quickly put it out, so there was minimal damage. But it was definitely on fire. Definitely on fire. So here we see KITT, crashing into the back, and this is the left-hand blind drive car. If you look real close, you can see parts of the Season 2 Hero Dash, which this car had. After they didn't need the Season 2 Dash anymore, they put it in the left-hand blind drive car, which we've covered in the past. So you can see that there. Yeah, and then, KITT bashes through this little wall here so they can get in. The left-hand blind drive car sits here for a while the front of it is cooking under this fire. So I'm sure there was damage. I'm sure the bumper melted or definitely had some damage to this car at this point. So as for the number of cars used in this episode, they actually had 10 Knight Rider cars, which is on the higher end, right? Of course, we have the left-hand blind drive car here. We've got the Flivver car here. The Season 3 and 4 Hero car. The full-time convertible. The right-hand blind drive car. The hardtop stunt car, the one we've seen since way back in Season 1. The Season 4 insert car. The other hardtop stunt car, this is the one we own. The full-time Super Pursuit Mode car. And finally, the trailer convertible car. So those are your 10 Knight Rider cars used in the episode. All right, so moving forward, we see the front of the... which car is this? I think this is... You can tell by the nose, it's got to be either... I think this is the right-hand blind drive car. Yeah, this is the right-hand blind drive car. And take a look at this. This is the scene where you see CO2 fire extinguisher material coming out to put it out. And if you look underneath, you can actually see how they mounted these pipes under here to shoot the CO2. All right, so then we have this scene of Michael telling KITT, he's going to auto cruise. He's going to go out the roof and jump over to one of the logging trucks to knock out the guy. Notice he's wearing this green and red shirt, but then we cut to him getting out, and he now has a blue jean shirt on. This is actually reused footage from Season 3's The Rotten Apples, whenever the Rotten Apples bus is getting away and he has to board it. That's where this scene comes from. And then, of course, it cuts back here, and we see not Hasselhoff wearing the correct shirt, but not Hasselhoff jumping over to the machine to stop the guy. All right, the Flivver car, right? So didn't we just say goodbye to the Flivver car in Scent of Roses? Yeah, we did. But remember, this episode was filmed before Scent of Roses. So this is technically not the last time the Flivver car was used. Scent of Roses is still the last time the Flivver car was used. So here's your bonus Flivver car footage, right? All right, and finally, we're back at the house, and we see the house is still standing. We do see, evidence that it was burned, but how much of this is set dressing versus how much of this is actually burned wood? That's my question. Obviously, there was some damage to the property, but I bet it was repairable, and I'd be curious to know, I'm not really in tune. I'm sure there's some Dukes fans watching. Do we know, does anyone know if the house still stood after the filming of this episode in July of 1985? I think it did. Did it show up in any other movies or TV shows? Let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious about that. Alrighty, that's all we have for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Next time we're going to cover Deadly Nightshade. So another pretty decent episode with a special guest star, Lance Burton. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.